Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
In March, border agents encountered nearly 19,000 children at the border, the largest number recorded in a single month. Most of them fleeing poverty and violence in Central America. And the flow of migrant children is expected to only increase in the coming weeks, as reported by the New York Times. More than 20,000 children and teenagers are in the custody of a government system that is already at, quote, 103% of capacity, end quote, including nearly 17,000 in shelters run by the health department, according to briefing materials from the Operation Artemis, which is handling the process. Government projections obtained by the New York Times show that there could be more than 35,000 migrant children to be cared for by June. It's safe to say that we need to do something. The question is, and continues to be, what needs to be done? Is the Biden administration responding appropriately? Republicans are being quite critical. What's their plan to fix the situation? There's a lot to talk about, something we should all care about when we have children being held in detention facilities. Of course, we couldn't begin, though, a conversation on immigration without
True Chat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Well, we're hitting all the big ones here in a row, folks. This is one of those areas where President Biden is not getting good reviews, with his COVID and his response and the way he's dealing with that and the economy, his overall approval rating, all of those are in the plus numbers. This is the one area where he is getting the negative numbers. And it's because he's not addressing the situation, at least by what it seems like. I mean, yes, he's saying, well, we need to do something and I've got this person working on it, but the numbers are growing. There's no real leadership here like there has been on some of these other issues. And so his administration is taking a beating and things are getting worse. And, I guess, I don't know if you can't do well on all of it. I don't know. It seems to me like, as Justin likes to say, there's 24 hours in a day and many of us work 12 to 16 of them. So you should be able to squeeze some time in to take care of something like this when you're dealing with children. And you already have a setup. You have a process in place. All you need are more people and more places. So let's take care of it. We know what you need to do. We're going to get into, you have to do some background checks and you have to do health checks and you have to go before judges. And, the immediate concern is you need places for these children, but let's go. Everything's there. The system is set up. Let's get the people. Now, I did like one thing I read in the article. They have sent out mass emails within the federal government and said, how would you like to get paid what you're getting paid right now, but go work for Health and Human Services? We're looking for volunteers to take care of this because those people have already been through the vetting process. They don't, it's not like if you or I wanted to go help out that we'd have to go through this 6-month process before they would let us
actually help.
So that's a good thing, and again, my point is, why isn't President Biden out there saying that's what we're doing? Why isn't he taking the lead and being visual like he's being visual on all these other topics that he is doing really well in the public polls? Not that I say you do this because of the polls. And we all know that I'm not a big believer in the polls in these last 6 or 7 years as to what they're really being stated here. But most of us are upset that these children are in that predicament. And the other thing is, and I was telling you, Justin, I don't think this is what we should do, but you can hire, 1,000 Greyhound bus drivers and Greyhound buses and load them all up and ship them back, to the border between someplace and someplace and drop them off. Now, I think that's horrible. I don't think we should do that at all, but at least we'd be doing something. Instead, we're just letting the situation get worse and we're not giving it any attention, at least publicly. You're not telling us that you're giving it any attention. If you're giving it attention privately, let us know what you're doing. Tell us what your plan is. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I'm going on and on. As you tell, it's like, if you're doing something, let us know about it. If not, why aren't you doing something about it? Do something. Something is better than nothing.
I get the impression that part of the issue is that we're kind of somewhere in between those. We're kind of doing something, but also not really addressing what I see as the larger issue, because you and I talked about this before the show. We don't tend to be fans on this program of Band-Aids, and I don't think most of our listeners are either, because it feels like, we're just doing a stopgap, whatever, and we're not really fixing the problem. I think this is one of those situations where two things are called for. We got to figure out a Band-Aid that's better than what we're doing, because obviously whatever's being done is inadequate, whether it's nothing or whether it is something. And like you said, because we're not being told, it's really hard to get a grasp on what really is being done. I mean, the New York Times in the article, which we have linked at thestateofus.org, you can read, they point out, that Biden's apparently been frustrated by what he sees as bureaucratic red tape when his Secretary of Health and Human Services is telling him, well, we're trying to do things, but here's why we can't do X, Y, or Z. And it's like, okay, great, you're frustrated, but while you're frustrated, we have 20,000 children that day in and day out are in, prison-like conditions.
Sign an executive order.
Right.
You made a big deal your first 2 or 3 days in office of signing like 25 different executive orders. I don't know what the number was, but obviously you don't have any problem signing executive orders. Use your power as the president to get something going here.
Right. Well, it's got to be said, right, on that front.
There's your Band-Aid, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
you had time to do an executive order to stop the border wall, but you didn't have time to figure out an executive order to make this better. I mean, I'm not saying that he hasn't done some executive orders that have had an effect on this, but why hasn't there been something larger? Because, and I think the other side of this, right, and there's no way to gauge how much of this there's politics at play. Because immigration, as we know, is not only an issue that divides the nation, it is also just a bad political situation, because most of the answers aren't clean cut and they're not easy and they're not fast. So it's like, spell political disaster, Well,
it was an issue under President Obama. It was a major issue. It was one of President Trump's main issues that he took on. And President Biden, and his folks are saying, well, but the Trump administration left us with this issue. Okay, they did. That's not a solution. Okay. I mean, that's not okay. All right. So you can say, well, they didn't tell us how bad it is. They didn't, you can tell us that they dropped the ball and didn't do what they said they would do. You can say, as it does in the article, they didn't tell us how bad things really were. Okay. Even if all of that's true. All right. You've been in there now, and what's your fix? The number of minors in border detention facilities are down by more 1,000 from the height of 5,000 last month. But the internal documents show that to handle a surge that the administration has said will continue to grow in the summer, the health department will need to release more than 800 minors a day by June, compared with the roughly 300 children currently being released daily. So there's a positive. We're releasing 300 kids. We're finding a place for them, either a foster home or a relative that's already here who's willing to take them. They've been properly vetted. Their health is good. So we're finding a place for 300 children a day. But by their own numbers, as you read in your opening, the numbers are going to double by June, which means you got to have a plan in place here and start sending 800 kids to a home, to some place that they will be cared for in order to keep up with the demand.
Well, and the other question is, and this is what I want to hope that we have time to talk about in the next segment, Lance, is is that really a good thing, or is it just better than the bad thing, right? Because the bad thing is holding them at the border or in these facilities where the care is questionable at best, and then at some facilities, maybe they get some schooling and some social structure and some other things. But is putting them in the foster care system, really good, or is it just better than the bad? And that's then, after we look at that and try to answer that, then the remaining question is, so what do we do about this other than just increase capacity, right? Just more capacity, just so that we can handle, the number of people coming in. What do we do about it? And we want to know your thoughts on all of this. So please send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. It's podcast@thestateofus.org. Send us an email. Let us know your thoughts. Read the article for yourself. We've got a lot more to talk about, including what is the better solution? Is there a better solution? And what's the larger issue at play? To find out, keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
In the New York Times article that we're referencing for today, it continues by saying, when they first cross the border, unaccompanied children and teenagers are taken to border jails. By law, they're supposed to be held there for no more than 3 days before being moved to about 150 shelters and other facilities and group homes overseen by Health and Human Services Department. But because of a lack of available space in shelters, the young people are often being held for a far longer in the often harsh conditions of the border facilities. When they eventually are shipped to health department shelters across the country, where they are required to receive schooling, medical care, physiological services, and recreation while officials vet family members, friends, or foster parents, they typically face further long waits, right? So it's not just arrive at the border facility and wait until you get transferred. It's then get transferred to another facility, wait again. And that's, if everything goes okay, maybe you get placed with one of these. And what I asked before the break was, and it's not supposed to be a rhetorical question, do we really think that's a good thing? In terms of, we place you with a foster family, right? If you have family in the country, they can take you, okay. That's a separate thing to talk about. But let's say you don't, right? And a lot of them don't. A lot of them, and you let this sink in for a minute, right? Things are so bad in their home country that their parent has decided that the very best thing for them is to leave them at the doorstep of the United States. Ooh, that's, things got to be pretty bad. I don't have kids, but just imagining, Lance, I don't know. You tell me, how bad would things have to be for you to take, when your daughter's 14 years old and say, I'm going to leave her at the doorstep of another country because that's better than what's happening in my home country. And I'm not judging the parents for that. I'm saying, how bad does something have to be?
But that's the point that I don't think many of us understand, is that there are no opportunities. I was listening to someone talk, and, we complain and we have our own issues here in the United States. But compared to many of these countries where these children are coming from, they don't have enough food to eat. They don't have a shelter. They're living outside and starving. So the opportunity to come to the United States, to the land of plenty, that's been the pull of the United States since our inception, is that you can come here and you can find a job and you can have enough food to eat and eventually have shelter. And then your children can get educated, and then they'll get a better job, and then they might own a home, and then their children may go to college. That's the pull of the United States. That's what we have here. And I think sometimes we become so caught up in our first world problems, we forget that there are a lot of people in the world who are struggling to get enough to eat every day. You know, our struggle for many of us is, well, what am I going to have today? Oh, I'm tired of this. What can I do now? What can I do differently?
Not whether or not you're going to eat.
I mean, it's not the question of eating. Now, are there people in our country, you know, send us the emails and get involved in the conversation. I'm not saying we don't have a hunger issue in the United States. We do. But what I'm saying is, as a parent, you're looking at your children and you want what's best for them. And you know you can't provide it, but this place can. That's the ultimate sacrifice that you make as a parent. You're like, I don't want to leave my children, but that's how bad it is in my situation. They're going to die in my care because there is no food for me to get. You know, I always gave the example in class that I don't commit crimes. You know, I mean, I knock on wood, you know, I haven't ever committed a crime. I'm not even one that I haven't gotten caught, you know what I mean, other than a speeding ticket or whatever, you know, and I've gotten caught. I've paid a few speeding tickets. But I've never committed a crime. But I'm not going to sit here and be holier than thou and say I would never commit a crime. And I used to tell my students, if my children were hungry and I had looked for a job and it was, I would have to steal something and risk going to jail rather than put my kids to bed hungry, I said, I don't know that I wouldn't walk in somewhere and steal something so my children would eat. And the kids were like, oh my gosh, Mr. Jackson, you're a teacher. How dare you say you would choose to break the law? And I said, you don't understand. We're talking about my children. I would hope that I would find a way that I would know to go to a church or to knock on doors, or, you know, I'd get a job, you know, scraping the nasty stuff out of a bathroom or something. If somebody would pay me for it, I'd do anything to earn the money for it. But if you're saying it's the difference between my children, my daughters surviving or dying, I can't look you in the eye and say, well, I wouldn't commit a crime. I might. And that's what we have here, you know. But that was your question to me. Where I was going to go with this, as you talked about this with the foster care facility, is that the article states the United States has long struggled to quickly move children out of the government's care to make room for new arrivals. So this isn't a new problem. This is something that we've struggled with as a nation for years. And it says that most of the children are eventually matched with the parent who is already in the country, but others are handed over to more distant relatives, friends, or foster parents. So to your question, foster parents have always been a part of the solution. The more distant the connection, the longer the children are typically held in shelters while health officials do background checks to ensure their safety. Of the roughly 2,000 minors released to sponsors in the past week, so this is just in 1 week, we said 300 a day, so there's your 2,000, 7 days in the week. About half were reunited with parents or legal guardians in about 23 days. Those with more distant relatives or foster care had to wait on average nearly 2 months.
On average.
Right. And again, I know you don't like averages and all that kind of stuff, but you're looking at 23 days if they have a parent that's here,
right,
that they could identify, that could be found. Mm-hmm. You're still talking 3.5 weeks. So that's the best we can do. And the problem is that without more people, and obviously if you have more people working, you need to put more money at this. I'm not just saying you have to throw money at it, but obviously the Band-Aid solution is you need more people calling to find the parents. You need more doctors. You need more judges. Okay. That money needs to be spent to get this done. Put it in part of your infrastructure plan, because lo and behold, workers are infrastructure. That one I could get behind. You know, I know we did a show a couple weeks ago about what part I didn't think was infrastructure, but workers, you know, and you read in the paper every day, people can't find enough workers. Not to get off topic, but people are looking to reopen the economy. You know, forget COVID. Let's just folks, there aren't enough workers. If we reopen the economy, we're all going to be upset because there aren't enough people. There are not enough truck drivers to bring all the stuff to the businesses to sell, to do the,
Right.
I mean, I looked for stuff this last weekend. Went to 4 Best Buys. None of them had the object. They're like, nope, you can order it online. You can get it in a week, maybe.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
But the supply chain is not available. It's not here. It's not here.
Yep.
So, we're going to need workers. Doggone it. Let's spend the money to get these people processed.
The same reason Trump builds the wall, right? Which is because his supporters and precisely large donors, right, support it. That's, forget about whether or not it makes a difference. That's why it's done, right? And then the reason that Biden stops building the wall is because there's definitely a group of people that, we stopped building the wall, Okay. But we still have children being detained. So it's that same, and I told people this, when the wall's been a thing for, however long, and the whole thing that President Obama built more wall than Trump did, and, whatever, not that any of that matters. But the thing that irks me the most, right, on that component is that it distracts from the things that matter, like this, right? Because you have children being held part of the time in what are prisons, right? Maybe they're not prisons that were built for children, but they are prisons.
Due to lack of space,
right.
They're being held in a jail.
Yeah. So let's just call it what it is, right? And then, and instead we're worried about walls and whether they're being built or not. And it's like, yeah, we got other issues here that are really important. And I think that goes back to, it's frustrating to us because I think we all, or I would hope that most of us feel like, gosh darn it, this is something we ought to be able to figure out. To your point, we're the United States of America. And is this is the best we can do? This is the very best we got right here is this, not being able to process children, and figure out something better with them. And I think that's part of the frustration is we all feel like we ought to be able to do something better than this. Cause it's hard to call this good. I think it's just, I don't know. What is it better than? I don't know. There's not a lot that's, I guess, loading them on a bus and hauling them back would be worse, but this isn't a lot better because we're just keeping them in a cage, Well,
my question to you, and this is for you, you can take it. I'll give you time to think about it. But at the end of this segment, and you can start the next segment, what else would you do with them? If they don't have any relatives that are here and you're not going to send them back, isn't the foster care system the next? I mean, I'm interested in hearing what your answer would be. What do you do with them at that point for those young people, those children that are here who don't have any parents or aunts and uncles or any other relatives who came before them?
Well, let's do what we always do, Lance, and try to talk about solutions in the next segment, right? And we want you, the audience, to be part of this because we just got a comment from a listener the other day, Lance, didn't we? That was, we were asking for, solutions to the voting system, how to make it more equitable. And somebody wrote in and they said, and this is what we do. So the next time we're going to cover voting, guess what? We get to talk about it. And if you guys do that with this, I'm sure you have ideas that we haven't had. We're going to tell you what we think and what we've come up with and admit that they're not perfect because they're not. They don't fix everything, but that to me is important that you guys engage because that's how we find better solutions. So please send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. I'm going to endeavor to answer Lance's question, and Lance will try to answer Lance's own question in the next segment about what do we do? Is there something better than the foster care system, or what do we do about the larger issue, right? Because we're talking a lot again about symptoms of the bigger issue, right? So let's talk about it. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
According to government projections that the New York Times obtained, there could be more than 35,000 migrant children to be cared for by June. We've got 17,000 right now in government shelters, and that's at 107% of capacity. So we got a problem. Part of Lance's question at the end of the last segment was the options are, right, we get them processed. If they don't have family here, what do we do with them? It would seem the only options are keep them or send them back, which in fairness, generally, I think those are basically the two options. But I want to rewind a minute to get back to what if their parents hadn't left them, right? What if that wasn't the choice that we had to make people make? Now, just to be clear, I don't think we can eliminate that, okay? Because, for example, to say that the reason that all parents leave their children at the border of the United States is simply because they're trying to be good parents and set their child up for a better life isn't true. Is that what I think most of them do? Sure. Is that what all of them do? Of course not. So just like with everything, right, folks, understand that there are outliers.
It's never, and it's never always.
Exactly. So I hate that we have to say that all the time, but I don't want you guys writing in and being like, well, you know, there's still going to be people. Yeah, I know there will still be people that do that, and I got it. And I'm not just suggesting that we just, you know, open, quote unquote, the floodgates, so to speak, but we've talked about immigration before, and supposedly the thing that people are most concerned about illegal immigration, right, is not that there's going to be people from other countries coming in. It's supposedly, right, the drugs, the sex trafficking, right, and stealing of American jobs. So let's address those, Lance. We've done it before, right? First, the drugs and the sex trafficking. We did a great episode like a year and a half ago on the Coast Guard. And we don't have time to rehash the whole thing right now, but here's what you need to know, folks. It's something like 80%. And this is government data, so you're welcome to go look it up because it's available. Something like 80% of all illegal narcotics that come into our country come by sea, by the ocean, okay? Not across the physical southern border. And yet when you look at funding, it's about the opposite. We spend about 80% of our funding on the physical border. Now, I don't know about you. I don't think it takes anybody with an advanced mathematics degree to tell us that something about that equation's not right, right? If supposedly what we care about is stopping those things, the other thing is the effectiveness rate of the Coast Guard, right? Very high. Lance and I talked about that. Much higher than physical border patrol. And I'm not down on that. It's just it's a different thing. And then you got that other piece of they steal American jobs, right? Again, you know, it's never, and never always, right? So are there, you know, immigrants that come in and take a job that an American might otherwise take? Sure. Is that 90% of cases? No, because either they're taking jobs that Americans don't want, right? Or they're moving to places where, like here in this community, help wanted everywhere. I mean, you mentioned that in the second segment, Lance, right? Everywhere. I mean, literally, every place is hiring. They can't get workers. Worker shortage before the pandemic. We were talking about that. So I guess to me, the step there is you got to fix that part of it. Address the criminal component on its own, right? And the other component is make it a streamlined process for people that want to be a law-abiding citizen to come into the country. It should not be as complicated as it is, and a parent certainly shouldn't have to choose between leaving their child on our border or, you know, not coming to the United States. I don't think that should be the choice that the situation we're putting them in. The foster care system, the shelters, those are all way down the list. If we fix the problem at the beginning, you're going to drastically lessen most of those issues, I think.
Okay, here's where I'm going to go quickly here because we're almost out of time. You can rebut me here. But I think the problem is hyper-nationalism. And we saw it with President Trump. Because why are people coming here? Well, because life is so bad in their country. So I'm not anti-immigration, but if you are an anti-immigrant person, okay, I'm not. I'm for open up the borders. We all come here. I'm all about competition. If somebody's smarter than me in school, then I make me work harder. If somebody's looking for a job and they're going to make me work harder, then that's good for the country.
Capitalism.
That's what I'm all about. So
that's what it sounded like.
I am never going to run from competition. Okay. So I'm not afraid of people coming in. I'm also big on diversity and, the country can grow. And if you look at all the times of economic growth, it's been when there is competition. Okay. So that makes all of us better. But if you are one of those people who say the things that Justin said and you don't want the immigrants here, then you can't just say, well, you know what? We're not going to give money to foreign countries anymore. And we're just going to shut down our borders. Because if we, as the United States, a world leader and a world power, do not help the economies in these countries, then the people are going to come here because this is where they have a better opportunity. Just like we would. If the United States wasn't a world power and someplace else was better, I would be packing up my family and I would be going to that place. I stay here because I think my family can do well here. To me, hyper-nationalism is the problem because as a world power, if we improved the economy and the political situation in the country where these people are coming from, they would rather stay there anyway. That's their home. So we fix those problems in these places where these children and parents are coming from, then that will stop the flow of immigration. And it will be much more effective than a border wall and even more effective than Justin's Coast Guard, which is a true statement, folks. I mean, you can go back and you can probably look up the show in the archives and it can become one of the new leading downloads, from a year and a half ago, because it was a very good show. But that's my situation is that, well, I don't want these immigrants coming in for blank, whatever reason you want to put in there. But by God, we're not going to spend any money on those countries either because we need to spend money on us, on America. Well, folks, to me, it's real simple. You can't have both because if you don't fix the life in these other countries for people, then they're going to want to come here. Because that's where the land of opportunity is. So that's my solution. I don't know what you think, Justin. You got a couple minutes there. But that's where I think is if you don't want immigration, and again, I will say it, I'm not anti-immigration. I'm fine with immigrants coming in. But if you're one of those people that don't like it, then you need to be encouraging our government to spend money in these countries to solidify their political and economic situation so that people aren't looking to come to the United States in the first place.
Lance pulled it back a step further than I did, right? Because I started with, we started all the way down because people are like, how do we
Well, you asked for a solution. So
right,
I went to the core.
I think this is good because I'm going to pull it back a step further. But people are, if you lost track, right? We started with there's children in facilities at the border. And how did we get to nationalism? Well, the way we got there, right, is what we try to endeavor to do on this show is let's yank back here, right, and focus on where did the problem come from, right, or get to the root of the problem or the core, or whatever you want to say. Let's find where does it emanate from. Immigration as an issue is different than the way that we talk about immigration, and that's what Lance is highlighting, right, because people cite things because he's basically pulling back to saying, right, I address the things that people say is the reason they don't like immigration. And he's saying, nah, they're not really concerned about those things. Those are just the talking points because they just don't like immigrants. And I'm going to pull it back a step further and say, I don't think that it's that they don't like immigrants, Lance. I agree with you. It's nationalism and that we see that, right? Just like they cite those three problems. So you can get rid of those three problems. You can say it's nationalism. Where does the nationalism come from, right? To me, this is what we've talked about so much on this show. And here it is, step by step. It's the urban versus rural divide, the increasing divide, right? We pull that back a step. Well, what's that? Us versus them, right? There is somebody else to blame for your problems. There is somebody else to blame. And I'm not saying it's your fault, okay? What I'm saying is we're blaming the wrong people. It isn't the immigrants' fault that rural America is dying. If you want to know whose fault it is, look up your congressman. And this isn't to sidestep and say that it's all on Washington because we don't share any responsibility. It's our fault that we're letting Washington get away with it, okay? They're driving the wedge. they're telling us that it's the Democrats to blame and them letting in the illegal immigrants, or that it's the Republicans to blame, right? And their lack of diversity and their hatred. And, that's what it all comes down to, right, folks, is it's the Republicans or it's the Democrats. And the thing that we're all missing is it's all of them, right? It's them, the us versus them. Who's them? It's not the immigrants, right? That's not who it is. They're not the reason that you're out of a job. It's because our fat cats in Washington won't get off their butts and do the hard work to fix the problem. What I think, Lance, are the biggest issues facing our nation, the death of rural economies and the pricing out of urban economies. It's becoming totally unfeasible to live in urban settings because the price of living is skyrocketing. And on the other hand, you've got rural communities that are just dying because there's no investment, there's no innovation, and it's not that they don't want to get better, they don't have any resources. So we all look for the easy answer, right? And the easy answer is it's the immigrants, right? That's the easy answer. And it's like, no. No, that's not it. Just because they're willing to work hard and traverse the world and come here for a better opportunity doesn't mean that they're the reason that you have a hard time, So sorry, that's my rant. But when you said that, it's like, yeah, it's nationalism. Why are people nationalistic? Because they're looking for somebody to blame. And the problem is homegrown. So the answer is not to clamp down and, grit our teeth and get mad at the rest of the world. It's not their fault. We've done this to ourselves. And if we want to fix it, to me, that's where it starts. So
we created the problem. We got to fix it.
Exactly. So you said that. It took me 3 minutes and you said it in 3 seconds. So
I had time to think while you were ranting and raving.
You were shaking his head as I was talking.
Yeah. Well, but what we've done here, folks, is what we try to do with every show. And we hope that you send us, an email at podcast@thestateofus.org, podcast@thestateofus.org, and participate in this conversation, because that's our mission here at True Chat, is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And that's what we've done again today. And this time the issue is immigration. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. You talk to your friends about it, your family, and they say, well, this sounds like a pretty interesting show. I'd like to get involved in the conversation as well. Tell them they can find us on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is both a syndicated radio program and a podcast. You can hear the podcast Tuesdays and Thursdays by 4 a.m. Eastern Time. So please be sure to subscribe so that you get updates about new episodes. The reason we do it is to hopefully get you thinking and to share your thoughts with us. Likewise, the radio program, which is basically the same thing, can be heard on the weekends in select talk markets around the country. So however you choose to listen, we appreciate it. Send us your thoughts. Send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. Share it with a friend. For the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.